Okay, I think we can go ahead and start. If some other people want to show up, they'll just trickle in and sign in. Welcome everyone to Parenting Lab. Uh, just wanted to draw your attention for Red Ribbon Week. It's not until the end of October, but just a heads up, we have special Spirit Day events. Our amazing TSA, Mrs. Baker, and admin put this together for us. So on Monday, the 27th, the children will be invited to wear spirit wear. The staff will be wearing spirit wear. Tuesday, the 28th, your favorite character. So a movie or cartoon character. Wednesdays is going to be bright colors. Thursday, the 30th, dream of a drug-free world. They'll be allowed to wear pajamas. Some of our kids have been asking with the weather getting colder, so this will be their chance to wear pajamas to school. Thursday, the 30th. And on Friday, the 31st, it's Halloween. And we're celebrating here as well as we aren't scared to be drug-free. So children will be allowed to wear school-appropriate costumes.
Hey, Red Ribbon.
A little tiny version here, you can make a little picture. So again, welcome to our Parenting Lab. We want to thank our amazing admin that make this possible, Principal Santos, Dr. Rocca, Mrs. Baker, our TSA, she's working online too, making sure that everyone online gets what they need. And we want to thank Miss Fatima and Miss Precious in the office. They get us all our snacks. Kwani and Mr. Garcia get us our water, clean up the area, making it beautiful and hospitable. And me, I'm Amber. Welcome, welcome. Just a reminder of our norms and expectations during Parenting Lab. We ask that you use respectful language, especially in person or online or in the chat. This is recorded and the chat is recorded, so we want to use appropriate language, positive, uplifting words. Limit your phone use while you're here. If you need to take a call, just step outside. Side conversations, I'm really excited if y'all get into it, but keep the discussions limited to time for discussion. If it's not time for discussion, just in deference to any of our guest speakers or presenters. Just wait until the end. If you do have a concern, complaint, something you want addressed, you can direct that to me. I just ask that you wait to the end of the presentation, and I will get you to the administrator, adults, FUSD, whoever you need that can probably fix the issue. Also, I want to remind that if you need help as far as wanting to speak to someone in our social emotional department, you can do that. Sorry, thank you. You do not have to wait till the end of the meeting. So in the event something we are talking about, because sometimes these can be heavy topics, makes you feel, I don't want to use the word trigger because some people get triggered by the word trigger, so I apologize. But in the event you do want to speak to someone social emotional, you can just get up, excuse yourself, and go to the office and request that. They will get someone for you right away, or flag me down. Reminder of our mission statement here at Phoenix. We want to create an equity-centered environment where all of our students feel empowered to rise and be the best they can be in school, out of school, and beyond, wherever they may go in life. Our agenda for today, y'all signed in on the sheet, those online, or they can watch it later and find out what we're talking about. Also, today is World Mental Health Day. So last week we talked about taking care of yourself, showing yourself some self-love so that you can be the best you can be for your family and those that rely on you. Just a reminder of that today and this weekend. Take care of you. Today, we're going to be talking about countering hate speech. This will tie into what we're going to talk about later in this month is the love languages. So first, we're going to look at the more negative hate speech of language. It has a varying definition depending on who you're going with, but for the purposes of today, we're going to be using this study, which defines hate speech as a derogatory expression about people on the basis of assigned group characteristics, and it is based on an intention to harm, and it does have the potential to cause harm. So it's looking at intent as well as the language used and who it's directed at. So on your sheet, there's some little questions. For the purposes of those at home, I've duplicated the questions up here. If you could just jot down, we're going to be looking at how words just make images pop into our head and make perceptions of others we don't know pop into our head. So if someone were to tell you, for this example, I used your friend, if your friend tells you that neighbor is a total rat, how do you, who don't know this neighbor, possibly expect this neighbor to look, to act, to speak? So just some adjectives that come into your mind or a sentence. No other information. Your friend just said this. And then likewise, if your friend says that neighbor is such a cockroach, add your own inflection, but if they're using these type of words to describe this neighbor, what images pop into your head? How do you expect this person to behave, act, or speak? And final example is that neighbor is like a disease. How do you expect them to look, act, or speak? So that was just an example for you, an adult, on how hearing certain kinds of words that may have certain connotations to you may make images in your head pop up, and you'll already have a preconceived notion of this neighbor before you even meet the neighbor. Children are exceptionally susceptible to hate speech. So they absorb everything. Y'all might have noticed. They want to see what you're doing, know what you're doing. They ask, what are you doing? Why are you doing it? They'll start copying you. They'll copy their siblings. They'll copy their older siblings. They'll copy basically anything they see, TV, internet. They just absorb like sponges because that is how they are programmed to grow and develop. They are brand new to this world. So they've got to learn a lot of information very quickly. The positive of that is it helps them to survive, and it gives them tools they need to learn and grow and excel. The negative of that is if they are around negative or hateful things, they will absorb and internalize that too. So children exposed to hate speech can come in a variety of ways. It doesn't necessarily mean their caretaker or their parental figure. Children can be exposed to this from their neighborhood, from kids they see at school, from the peers they have outside in clubs or organizations. It can be from role models they watch on TV or see on the internet. Now with all these social medias, whatever the children are playing games and stuff online, the people they chat with, they can be absorbing all this negativity and all these hateful words and stereotypes towards groups. The trouble is when it becomes normalized. So if the child is never explained to what these words mean and how detrimental, hurtful they can be, they might think this is okay. And then they begin using this language directed at others. So for example, hate is taught. That's a quote from a UN spokesperson we're going to hear from later. But back in the World War II days, the Nazi Party was trying to influence all aspects of its society to get everyone on board with what that party believed. And they specifically targeted their youth, their children. So over the course of the 30s, it became the largest and then eventually only group that children could join. There was a boy version and a girl version. And the children were encouraged to enjoy this from their families, from peer pressure. They were kind of forced to, you didn't always have a choice. And again, it was selective. They only targeted the people that that group wanted in their group. Those that were discouraged or forbidden were what we'll learn about later, those that were considered the unmentionables, or what we find out becomes the victims of the Holocaust. But this was a huge movement, the Hitler Youth, and it grew to the millions. So by 1940, 7.2 million children were in the Hitler Youth. It's not just in history, unfortunately. To this day, children are recruited actively for different militant groups around the world. Up to 2022, I think is the most recent figure, they had documented over 105,000 children being used as child soldiers, they call them. But that's not necessarily just soldiering, it's anything that a militant group may be using these children for, often very exploitative, abusive, detrimental to these children. And it is a violation of human rights and child rights. But it happens. And it's because these groups know children are malleable, they're very susceptible. They can mold them into what they want them to be, to drive any kind of, fortunately, dangerous, hateful, or sometimes just a civil dispute that's going on in that country. So the UN has a slightly different definition of discriminatory language, hate speech. The basis is that it is bigoted, intolerant, or contemptuous toward a group. It's usually a targeting device for any of these specific groups. So if one race dislikes another race, one ethnicity dislikes another ethnicity, one nationality, one religion, one gender identity or expression, a sexual orientation, or a disability. So one group will dislike this other group based on one of these characteristics, and they may create a vocabulary of negativity and hate for disparaging and isolating these groups. And it goes through many forms of media. It can be things that are said, things that are written, images, pictures, symbols, gestures, and now it is online. So hate speech is everywhere, unfortunately. This is a short clip from an intellectual named Stephen Fry. He talks about a book. The book is titled The Good Old Days, and it's a collection of letters written by Nazi officers during World War II to their families. And he explores how hate speech becomes so commonplace in society, it desensitizes people to the cruelty and malice behind it. So,
no exaggeration to say, I think, that one of the acts that most of us would agree was a supreme low point in the history of our particular civilization in the last 100 years, certainly, was the mass extermination of 8 million Jews and Gypsies and others by the Nazis, the Endlösung von Jüdisches Problem in Europa, as they call it, the final solution of the Jewish problem in Europe. Now, it is a massively difficult thing to get your head around, how ordinary people, and Germans are ordinary people just like us, and if we don't believe that, then we'll be doing to them what they did to the Jews. We will be ascribing a racist characteristic just to Germans that is unique to them. I think we can all be grown up enough to know that it's humanity doing something to another parcel of humanity, and that it was very extraordinary. We've seen examples of it in our own lifetimes in Rwanda and Burundi, and we've seen it in other places where massacres of quite extraordinary brutality have taken place. And in each one of these genocidal moments, or attempts at full genocide, in each example was preceded by language being used again and again and again to dehumanize the person that had to be killed in the political eyes of their enemies. In other words, it began in the 1930s. In fact, it began quite earlier, a little than that, but the Jews were rats, were vermin, were vice, were Affenmenschen, ape men, Untermenschen, which is subhuman in German. They were subhuman, they were ape men, they were rats, they were vermin, they were a bacillus, they were a virus, they were anything but a human being. And the same thing happened on the radios. The Hutu and the Tutsi were slaughtering each other. Again, the word rats was used, vermin, and lice and insects. And if you start to characterize week after week after week after week after week, you start to think of someone you're slightly sullen and disagree, you don't like very much anyway. You're constantly getting the idea that they're not actually human. Then it seems it becomes possible to do things to them that are we would call completely inhuman and lacking humanity. And oddly enough, we're the only species that does it. It is interesting and important to remember that it is language that not only guarantees our freedom, free exchange of ideas such as this, in which one is allowed to say anything, in which one would hope everybody observes the decencies of debate and of good nature and is not cruel and unkind, and, mocking and derisory, unpleasant, vicious, or indeed whipping up violence. But as long as ideas are exchanged freely, then we can more or less guarantee some level of stability within our society. But the moment we begin to use special language for special people and special terms of insult for special terms of people, then we can see very clearly, and history demonstrates it time and time again, that's when people are suddenly perfectly ordinary people are able to kill. There's an amazing book called Ach, die schöne Zeiten, which has recently, I think, been translated under the title Those Were the Days. And it is a quite horrific thing to read because it is so ordinary. It is simply the letters home from the guards and soldiers and SS members and officers of the death camps of Auschwitz and Treblinka, home to their families. And a typical letter might read, "Oh, you would have been so proud of the men. We had an extra special action coming today on the train we hadn't been warned about. It was a whole 700 extra had to be processed. The men never complained once. They went about their business. I was so proud of the men, especially as it was so hot. Do tell young Klaus that I've seen the results of his history exam, and if he doesn't get a better grade, I should be very cross with him. Meanwhile, here's a bottle of plum brandy." And you look at that, and you know that special action, that Sonderaktion, meant 700 people had come in all men, women, and children had come in to be gassed and killed and burned. And he's writing home to it, and it's a father writing an affectionate letter to a mother. It's so human that it makes one gasp at how this kind of happened. And language is at the root of it. And I suppose that's why we have to be careful about our language, or at least it's why we have to be alert to it and we have to think about it.
Are you looking to establish your business?
Okay, so. And that was Stephen Fry. He is of Jewish ancestry. He struggles with bipolar disorder and he has had cocaine addiction in the past. So he speaks on a lot of topics that are relevant to him in his life. He's talked to some of his family members and ancestors that did live through this. There is more from him if you would like to learn more, but on your sheet, I just want you to jot down why, according to Mr. Fry, how did the use of hate speech incite, encourage, whip up ordinary people into committing violence and attempted genocide against others? So I just handed out an article. It's just an excerpt. It's a much longer article, but we just needed this little piece. Dehumanizing rhetoric as a facilitator of recourse to violence against the defenseless. And it's a study on how using hateful language, dehumanizing language, actually increases violence against those target groups and how it is capable of doing that. So if you don't mind just skimming over it a little bit, and then on your sheets, there is a question based on the article, why do you think the use of dehumanizing language like hate speech has been linked to making, quote, violence easier to perpetrate by aggressors towards their targets? So what about the speech might make violence, quote, easier to commit? And y'all could write on the sheet, take notes. I think I got highlighters in the buckets if you want them. So just kind of gleaning some information from the article. Hate speech is often the aggressor dehumanizing their target. It can be interpreted essentially as an aggressor saying, quote, I believe blank, whoever, whatever the target is not worthy of legal rights, safety, or life. It has been suggested there is a dual model of dehumanization. According to this study, there are two main forms. One is animalistic, a form of dehumanization in which language is used to negatively liken humans to animals in that they are considered mindless beasts, lacking any self-control or discipline or intelligence, and they, quote, are designed to be used. This form of dehumanization is often in the context of ethnicity, race, or topics like slavery, immigration, and genocide to justify one group behaving that way towards another. The other form of dehumanization is mechanistic. Language is used to negatively liken humans to objects or robots. They don't have feelings, rights, or individuality. This often appears in medicine or sexual objectification. Humans are just numbers, things to be used and discarded, like a machine or device. It's just kind of a visual of what this style of language is likening humans to. It does facilitate acts of aggression based on studies we have conducted in this field. The use of hate speech, just as Stephen Fry suggests, normalizes violent practices to which otherwise would be considered shocking, cruel, or immoral. An aggressor can usually find it easier to inflict violence or pain on people if they don't think of them as people or don't see them as equals as people. On the flip side of that, they also experience less guilt or shame. So usually when a human causes harm intentionally or accidentally to another, they feel some kind of shame or guilt afterwards. There's an after effect of that. When a group has been dehumanized, that guilt or shame starts to ebb away from the aggressing group. So again, as Stephen Fry referenced in the historical context with the Nazi Party, it became so commonplace to exterminate large quantities of these dehumanized peoples that those involved didn't even really feel that violence or shame. Now, they may have afterwards, of course, there may have been mental health ramifications, but they're talking about in the moment the ability to perform these acts of cruelty or genocide. This is the UN speaker I had mentioned earlier. If I knew how to use a computer.
We all know that no child is born with hate. Hate is taught. We must pay attention to hate speech, what it can do, its capacity to completely destroy, its capacity to completely dehumanize. We need to understand that no society in the world is immune from hate speech. I've just come back from Cox's Bazar in Bangladesh, and I spent a lot of time among the Rohingya people. Hate speech was employed to dehumanize the Rohingya, referring to them as subhuman, referring to them as fleas, referring to them as thorns that needed to be removed. And ultimately, that is precisely what happened. By the time they arrived in Bangladesh, they had gone through decades of torture, decades of displacement, decades of dehumanization. And this hate speech that has been employed is something that we must pay attention to. There's a lot of information on Bosnia and Herzegovina, on what happened in Srebrenica. The hate speech that preceded and accompanied the killing of the men and boys in Srebrenica. There is a lot of information on the Tutsi in Rwanda and the moderate Hutu. And the hate speech that was used to describe the Tutsi, how they were dehumanized. We need to look at what happened to the Jews during the Holocaust. We need to see how much hate speech was employed to the extent that propaganda really was just spewing out hate speech against the Jews, describing them in ways that were designed to make it possible for the ordinary person on the street to just get out and participate in either killing the Jews or reporting on them or getting rid of them. So my message really to everybody is that genocides happen within communities. Genocides happen to you and me. When a genocide unfolds, the people targeted are people who are ordinary, and we must keep paying specific attention to the narratives that we pass on from one generation to the other. Their narratives in which communities share the trauma they experienced and they pass it on to their children. We all know that no child is born with hate, that hate is taught. And we know that the first step of socialization for a child is the family. The child begins to hear about hate from parents, from siblings. They begin to hear about stereotypes, about other ethnic communities, about other racial, religious communities, and they begin to understand that there is something called an other, that there is us and then there is the other. We then move to the school, and then we keep being socialized this time by the media, by religious organizations, by the political issues that we see happening. At this point, the child is now probably getting into university and they began to internalize it. They have the stereotypes in place, they have the prejudices in place. Then what that means is that that adult who was a child born without hate becomes the person who continues the next circle of socialization. And ultimately, what happens is that when people begin to fight each other, especially at the local level, then we have our war nonsense and we learn how to deal with it. So what that means is that we must find ways to keep interrupting that circle of socialization through education, through knowledge, through having friends from different ethnic, racial, religious communities. And what I've learned is that the same tools that are used to spread hate often turn out to be the best tools to counter hate speech. So, for example, the cell phone, it's become a tool that's almost indispensable to many people. And it's also become a tool in which hate speech is spread through social media. The same tool can be used to counter hate speech. Social media is still an extremely useful tool of engagement. We just need to know how to speak to the issues that people need addressed. We must have conversations with our children and tell them not to fear difference and tell them that difference is a really good thing. It's the perspectives that each brings to the table are perspectives that you would never hear if you just stayed with people who look and speak like you.
Using the information gleaned from the video on the back of the sheet, are these questions based on what we've just heard? What is one possible place children might learn to quote hate others? And hate speech has been identified as a precursor to atrocity crimes, including genocide. What are three mediums that have been weaponized to spread hate speech? And what is one way that we, as the parental figures in these children's lives, can interrupt this cycle of hatred for our children? Okay, so I handed out an article just now. It's how to talk to your child about hate speech from UNICEF. As you read through the article, it gives some suggestions on where children can be affected by hate speech and what we can do about it as their parental figures to counter whatever negativity, cruelty, or hatred they may be absorbing, whether inadvertently or directed at them. As you read, just kind of look at in your own life, have you as a parental figure encountered your child using hate speech, either on purpose because they wanted to hurt someone's feelings, or on accident because they were just repeating something they heard from someone in the extended family, someone online, someone on the YouTube, someone at school, anywhere your child may have been, and are just repeating what they heard? And then as a parent, what do you feel is the greatest challenge to helping your child understand the harmful impact of using hate speech on others? And from the article, what are 3 suggestions for talking to your child about hate speech that you would actually be comfortable utilizing in your home with the child to counter this challenge? So this is just a summation of some recommendations from articles and online. In the event you encounter your child using hate speech, it is recommended that you remain calm and explain to them the impact of their words and establish clear boundaries on what words are okay to use and what words are not okay to use, especially if it's coming from a place of hatred or anger. The goal is to correct their behavior and teach them empathy, not shame them, so that they actually learn from their action and want to change and want to correct it. So explain what hate speech is. Sometimes children really don't know. They're just saying things they heard. The words don't mean anything to them, but it gets a reaction. And to a child, the reaction itself can be the entertainment, not realizing that they are causing harm or hurt or malice. Do use age-appropriate examples and describe the impact of, well, how would you feel if someone said this to you? Trying to get the child again to empathize, to see things from the other's perspective, and explaining why this could be unacceptable behavior and is wrong fundamentally, as it will violate the dignity, rights, and respect we should be showing towards others. always look at the child's motivation and keep an open mind. Again, sometimes they're just imitating a person they've encountered totally outside of your control. Our child may say something that I have never said this, and this has never been said in my home, but this child is saying it. So figuring out where it came from. And sometimes you can control that and sometimes you can't. If it's something online, you can probably limit the child's exposure to that. You can't watch that channel anymore. You can't watch that YouTuber or that influencer anymore. You can put parental guides on your television and electronics. But if it's somebody that the child is legally entitled to be exposed to, like an extended family member or a partner of yours, then you'll have to do a little different on damage control. The child may just be trying to be funny. They got a big reaction out of it around their peer group and oh, cool. So now they think it's fun to use this kind of language, not realizing the greater ramifications. It can be an exercise of power. If a child is feeling powerless, shamed, hurt, they may be lashing out. And again, it can just be parroting things they've heard. So try to be a role model whenever possible, keeping calm, making sure that what you say around others, even if you're talking to your friends or your family, other adults, be aware of what the child may be hearing because they do not have the experiences and context we have. Just a silly example. I'm driving, I get cut off by a BMW and I'm like, oh, them BMW drivers, blah, 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 blah. Now I'm being hateful on BMW drivers. A child hearing that might be, oh, I like Miss Amber, so I hate BMWs too. So it can be a misdirected attempt to show camaraderie and love of you, to attempt to dislike the things you are accidentally professing a dislike for. So always being conscientious of what we're saying around our children. And do enforce consequences. If they've been explained to, if you truly believe that they know what they're doing and they chose to act out in this way, that they know there will be consequences for violating these rules. And make sure they understand that some things aren't funny. So yes, groups can pressure, they get the peer pressure. Y'all probably remember it, when y'all were kids. It's hard, but we have a responsibility to our kids to help them rise to a higher level. Do always monitor their online activity, not only for hate speech, but unfortunately, there's a lot of other terrible things online and predatory actions and things. So we should always be aware of what they're watching, what they're looking at. Teach digital citizenship. We're going to have more on that at later parenting labs, but there are resources in the district if you're interested. Help them know how to dislike, hit the down arrow, show them that they can control some of what they're seeing and that they don't have to just go along with it. And in the event you need any additional support, always administrators, counselors, social emotional, we can hook y'all up. So if hate's an illness, love's a cure. What is one way you can model rising above the hate for your child to imitate? So it's just at the bottom, just one little thing you think you do already or that you can do, that in the event your child does encounter hate speech, how you can show them a better path. And this is one of the recommendations is to embrace diversity in your life, exposing your child to a bunch of different things, backgrounds, books, movies, music, food from other cultures and places to help them have a more open mind. This is a commercial. It's from an old Super Bowl ad. I'm not endorsing this product. I am not endorsing the captivity of exotic animals in any way, unless you are a trained zoologist or licensed to do that. It's just a sweet commercial about togetherness. So I hope that this is not.
Robin Hood and Little John walking through the forest, laughing back and forth at what the other has to say. Reminiscing this and that and having such a good time. Little lolly, golly, what a day. Never ever thinking there was danger in the water they were drinking, they just guzzled it down. Never dreaming that a scheming sheriff and his posse was a bunch of them gathering around. Robin Hood and Little John running through the forest, jumping fences, dodging trees, trying to get away. Contemplating nothing but escape and finally making it. Ooh, lolly, golly, quality. Ooh, lolly, golly, quality.
Again, not endorsing a product. I just think it's a really cute commercial.
Their dear friend joined the same thing. It's really cute.
So again, just doesn't want to extend for me. So I just want to thank y'all again for going with me on this journey. In the event you have any questions or concerns, again, we can discuss at the office, or we can get you to any social emotional support you might need. We can call your babies out and should be good. I promised I might wrap it up before the buses came this time. So thank y'all.